chasing ghosts down on Main Street. They're chasing shows in the park. The temps are dropping fast now, and it's starting to get dark. The landscape's getting scary. Beer's getting shrill. There's election season coming. They're going for the kill.
Climate change. If we cannot get this catastrophe that is climate change under control, then nothing else matters. But ultimately, nothing will happen on the climate front unless we get campaign finance reform in order. If we cannot get money out of politics, then nothing will get done on the most important issue, which is climate change.
Definitely am concerned about the environment and healthcare. The environment, because this is the only planet we have. We have to take care of it.
Well, I feel strongly about economic security, that people need to earn a decent wage. People now are working full-time and still not able to make a decent income, so we need to work on that. We need to be careful that our policies aren't harming people. Well, I feel strongly about economic security, that people need to earn a decent wage. People now are working full-time and still not able to make a decent income, so we need to work on that. We need to be careful that our policies aren't harming people.
Making marijuana legal it would be great for Maine. It would bring new revenue here, more jobs, and it would be just great to stop punishing adults for using a substance that's safer than alcohol. That's my main issue. Another issue. I'm very anti-war, so I wish there was more discussion of our foreign policy and more of a non-interventionist foreign policy instead of a policy of regime change and intervening.
Economic equality, definitely. People aren't making enough money and their jobs are gone.
I think the most important issue is actually the corrupt influence of money in politics. I think money in politics steals the voice of the people. I think it controls the people elected because they think they need money to be elected, so they don't really reflect the needs of the voters at all. And I think this is why you're seeing Bernie just surging, and unfortunately, I think that's why you're seeing Trump surging.
That there's a serious problem in this country when it comes to healthcare. That people like me and millions of others in the wealthiest nation on earth can't afford healthcare. That just doesn't seem to make sense. Likewise, the amount of money my parents pay for school tuition at the private college I go to is ridiculous.
So healthcare and college education.
Healthcare and college education should be something everyone has access to.
Thank you.
I think getting money out of politics and publicly funding all races would be from top to bottom would be a great place to start.
Education, first and foremost, because education is the solution. And if we're not looking long and hard at education, then we're not doing anything.
And the second?
Would be money in politics, campaign finance, and who we're electing and who we're backing all comes down to who's paying for it, and that needs to not be the case. I think the environment is huge for me, and then kind of going along with that is getting sort of money out of politics. That there's these huge multinational corporations, even right here in Maine. I'm a big water activist, and we've got Nestle Poland Springs in my hometown. And they've sort of sided with a lot of the state politicians in Maine and our local politicians as well. So really influencing our natural resources in my community.
I would say poverty and income inequality, because that negatively affects so many people in my community and me specifically. I can't make enough money to go to school and live on my own. So I have to choose either be in an incredible amount of debt, but being independent, or living with my parents and still living with slightly less debt, which is ridiculous.
Well, a woman's choice. I just don't want to see history taking a backward turn. And
single-payer health care. Because we grew up as military brats, and that's basically what you have in the military is a single-payer health care. And look, we're very healthy. We have no complaints about the health care we got in the military as children. And we see that, there's no reason why that can't work with a single-payer system rather than this whole corporate thing that's going on now about medicine.
The single-payer healthcare is my primary issue. The idea is that healthcare is a right and not a privilege, and the government has shown that it is very efficient in running Medicare, and so expanding that to include everybody else should actually be a very cost-effective way to do that. The second issue, I think, for me is the income inequality and money in politics. And I think the two are extremely related because they foster income inequality is obvious, but the money in politics creates political inequality, where the people that have access to large contributions get more power than those that don't.
Chances are you'll never know. Pump your track so it doesn't show. Changing textbooks to stay in line. Hell with you, I got mine.
More power than those that don't.
Environment first and foremost. I mean, nothing else matters unless we fix that, obviously. And secondly, I think, which is also in conjunction with that, getting money out of, the big corporations that are, like the oil companies, for instance, need to get their money out of politics if we're ever going to make any headway on the environmental issues, and that falls down to all the issues.
Stacking the deck against small and moderate businesses and in favor of the wealthy, selling out the Congress to the lobbyists. Those are the issues that I consider to be most important to me.
I feel pretty strongly about bringing more attention into education because we are just raising the standards for our students and for our teachers, and that's what we should be doing, but we're not giving them the resources and the training and the opportunities to do so. In terms of like big paradigm shifts and philosophy shifts, we're not really putting in the energy and giving teachers the attention that they need in order to raise the bar for students. Another one, I guess, is just getting money out of politics as much as possible.
I guess superdelegates and their ability to kind of take away the effectiveness of the popular vote.
I'm big into reforming how campaigns are being run in this country, both in terms of money and superdelegates. Kind of influencing things in ways that I feel are undemocratic. And then my other big issue is universal health care. I'm an EMT in Ellsworth. And the last thing I want people thinking about when I pick them up in an ambulance is, how am I going to pay for this? And a lot of times that is a concern of theirs. And, frankly, that sickens me a little bit to think that we live in a country where, we've got so much money to spend on so many things, and we don't take care of our people. We just, let people in power stay in power and use their influence to kind of gain more, while the people who actually, need stuff aren't getting it.
So I've done a lot of restorative justice work, and so criminal justice reform is a big one. It's a really, really non-partisan issue. It saves a ton of money, and I'd encourage everybody to check it out. Climate change, carbon tax, let's go for it. Conservation is my sort of number one for climate change. We need to just use less energy, and so looking for ways to do that while improving our standard, quality of life would be great.
The economy and poverty. So trying to eliminate poverty, trying to make sure everybody has at least a middle-class standard of living, to make sure that no one's homeless, to make sure everyone's taken care of. That's the most important issue. The second most important issue is the environment. Obviously, our planet's at risk. We're in the middle of a mass extinction right now, and the entire planet's about to flood. So you know, and then I guess if I were going to add a third issue, if I may, trying to have as much peace as possible, making sure we don't get into another war we don't need to get into, making sure we can prevent as many as we can.
Where did all the moderates go? And the statesmen who bridge different thought. The scholars, the centrists, and the communicators. The greater good for which they fought. That's the thing about progress. Some are left behind. You're entitled to your opinion, but not your facts and lies.
Social justice, obviously, equal rights for all people, regardless of race, creed, sexual orientation, religion. That's very high on my list of priorities. And economic justice is also very high on my list of priorities. I think that's something that has kind of been pushed by the wayside for a number of years in our politics, and it needs to be reprioritized.
Healthcare and Social Security is a real critical issue.
Gun violence has to stop. That's insanity. And a woman's right to choose.
I am passionately and deeply concerned about education, K through 12 as well as college, gun violence, and I would also say women's rights generally, including healthcare, right to choose, and wage equality.
Preferably separated from insurance entirely. Healthcare should just be a thing that is accessible and affordable and shouldn't rely on insurance. Good quality, accessible education. And yeah.
There's a feeling that I have that the leadership of the Democratic Party is wanting to maintain the status quo because they're afraid of change, and therefore, just like the Republican Party and the media and the Koch brothers, what's happening is that the Democratic Party is trying a bit to stifle Bernie energy.
Campaign finance reform, I mean, I think it's absolutely epic that Bernie Sanders has disproven that, you know, you can't run a national campaign without taking super PAC money. I didn't really think that he would get this far doing that, and he has outraised Clinton with all her super PAC millions and whatnot, and that's just been absolutely mind-blowing. So I think that's going to be a successful model for the future, and I think it's the way the party needs to go, and I'm only going to support candidates that do that. The other, let's see, it's hard to pick one other thing, but I'm really happy that people in the party seem to be embracing real strong progressive values like universal health care and ending the war on drugs. Ending marijuana prohibition is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's been ignored by both parties for too long. So I'm really glad that one of the major contenders in this race, Bernie, is really pushing for that.
I feel very, very strongly about immigration. I think we are a nation of immigrants. Closing our doors and saying the door is closed, you can't come in, shame on us. I'm also terribly concerned about just the fact that the income inequality, where we have people who are living in 2 and 3 houses and doing extremely well, and others may not be able to keep up the house they have.
The most important issue, as in every presidential election cycle, to elect Democrats is because of the Supreme Court. The fingers of the Supreme Court reach out to everything that is critical right now to our democracy. Citizens United, which is something I'm very passionate about, hinges upon that, getting big money out of politics, and I'm glad that Senator Sanders is driving this issue, even though I'm not in his camp. What he is saying is essential to our democracy, and expanding, as I was saying, voter rights and getting rid of the restrictive voter ID laws that disenfranchise so many Democrats, because Republicans realize they are not appealing to a broader swath. So all they have is shenanigans, legal or not, to depress Democratic votes so they get their way. So it all stems from the Supreme Court. Everything filters down from that. My two hot button issues: end Citizens United and expand access to the ballot box. If we can expand access to the ballot box and get big money out of politics, we could probably have a Democratic majority in this country for decades, probably the rest of my life.
Where did all the moderates go? And the statesmen who bridge different thought. The scholars, the centrists, and the communicators. The greater good for which they fought. That's the thing about progress. Some are left behind. You're entitled to your opinion, but not your facts and lies.